Remakers Mark, Episode 62, The Last Dragon. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Remakers Mark. Here we are in our 62nd episode where we're discussing the Motown-funded and filmed kung fu movie, The Last Dragon. With me, as always, are my friends Andy Wicks. Andy, how are you? And what is your favorite 80s fashion?
I am tip-top, and my favorite 80s fashion is asymmetrical sunglasses.
Ooh, nice.
Thank you.
That's a good call. Jeremy Nilsson, how are you? And what about you? What is your favorite 80s fashion?
I am rolling, and my favorite 80s fashion is probably the Miami Vice bright-colored t-shirt underneath a sport jacket with the sleeves rolled up.
A white sport jacket.
A white sport jacket with the sleeves rolled up.
Nice.
It's a good choice.
Accentuated by loafers and no socks.
Oh, you went there.
You got to round out the ensemble. It just makes sense. Leroy, how are you tonight, and what is your favorite 80s fashion?
I'm wonderful, and I was really into the neon colors on just about everything. And if you remember, I used to have a neon green guitar.
Yep. That neon green guitar, I think, has been played live with Supergroup, if I remember correctly. Yep. At a wedding, in fact.
Yes.
Yeah. Very good. Good choice. Mark Joesting, how are you, and what is your favorite 80s fashion?
I'm well, thank you. And I think I'm going to go with hammer pants.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very focused 80s fashion, but an 80s fashion nonetheless.
Oh, iconic, though.
Very tough to run in.
But so easy to fly in.
Very safe to skydive in.
That's true. The flying squirrel pants. 100%.
They're not wings so much as they're flaps of skin.
Gross. My name is Kyle Delahunt. I will be your host once again this fine evening. I am doing very well. Thank you for asking myself. Man, I don't know. I'm going to go with Zubaz.
Minnesota's own.
That's a good one.
I kind of can't believe that Zubaz didn't make a comeback somehow during the pandemic. Like, if people were thinking, hey, I need comfy pants that I just wear around the house and wear nowhere else, like, sure, there's sweatpants, sure, there's leggings, but come on, there's Zubaz. I mean,
I'm surprised like Lululemon hasn't bought that brand up and made it their own.
Lubas, right? I mean, it just works. Yeah,
Lemons with a Z.
If Zubaz were ever going to find their second heyday, it was 2020.
Yeah, alas.
Missed opportunity.
It could be because people weren't able to go to the gym and show them off.
I mean,
Fair enough.
You got a good point, Lee.
I think they just needed like a Jesse Ventura or whatever today's equivalent of Jesse Ventura is to just be out there and, you know, hawking the wares of Zubaz, but alas, not so much.
If a weightlifter wears Zubaz at home, does it even happen?
It's a good question. And if a tree falls on him, that's really too bad.
He'd power lift it.
Why is there a tree in your house? Mark, this movie was your choice, and as a result of that, you get to tell us a recommendation of some sort of what we should check out. So, what should we check out, Mark?
Well, I'm going to recommend a series of books which are collectively known as the Kingkiller Chronicles, authored by Patrick Rothfuss. People who know this series may be wondering why I'm recommending this now. The first book came out in 2007, the second book came out in 2011, and fans are still waiting for the third book. The reason that I'm recommending it now is because there's been some suggestion that the third book's actually going to be released this summer. I actually caught on to this and read the first two books last summer, and it was kind of really good timing, if the rumors are true, that is. But this series of books is a fantasy epic where you have your super cool hero, but it's told from the point of view of that hero, recounting his own story. And he does a very good job of telling his own story.
The first book is essentially like someone coming to have him tell his tale to them, right? And he does so at a tavern.
Yes, he is a tavern owner, and a person who likes to write things down seeks him out and asks for his story. Thus, we get our books
At open mic night.
Yeah.
Mark, I've been working my way through the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy by Tad Williams, which sounds of a similar ilk. Have you read those?
Yeah, a long time ago. But yeah, those are wonderful books.
Yeah, I'm working my way through the last book, which is actually split into 2 books. But yeah, I've been very much enjoying those. And we are of similar taste when it comes to the high fantasy stories. So I'm going to check out the King Killer Chronicles.
Yes, please do.
Rothfuss is a really excellent writer, and he's got his hands in a handful of video games, board games,
Role-playing game things.
Role-playing games, yep. The book that he's supposedly been working on for a decade. Like, it's no wonder that it's taken so long, because he's got his fingers in a lot of different things going on right now, and I'm so glad that he is, because he's really talented.
Yes, he is. I'm glad he exists in the world.
Plus, I think he's from Wisconsin, I want to say.
Really?
I think so. I think he's a Midwesterner. I could be mistaken, but I think so.
Born in Madison, according to Wikipedia.
There we go.
And he's only, he's like our age.
Yes, he's 27.
Yes.
Rub it in, everybody. Rub it in.
He's got a wicked beard, too.
Yeah.
Check out his Wikipedia page.
He's a fantasy writer. Of course he's got a wicked beard.
Yeah. He also looks like he was one of the dwarves in the Hobbit series.
Yes.
Well, good choice, Mark. I read the first one, and I got partway through the second one, and I think I just kind of OD'd on fantasy at that moment, and I just needed to take a pause, and I haven't gone back there. But I think this is a good motivator to have me do so. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Groovy. Well, let us now move on to the movie that we are discussing today, which is The Last Dragon. Andy.
Speaking of groovy,
you are our chief Sumerian and historian. Will you tell us a bit about that?
I will happily tell you about this movie. We have discussed in this podcast how 1985 may have been the best movie year ever.
Mm-hmm.
However, The Last Dragon also came out in 1985. The Last Dragon is a martial arts film starring such well-known mononyms as Timac and Vanity, and executive produced by Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown Records. What a Renaissance man. The film's plot, such as it is, follows Leroy Green, played by Timac, a young martial artist with an unhealthy obsession for Pan-Asian culture, as he pursues the highest forms of his art under a new master, who turns out to be a fortune cookie machine, but I digress. He apparently stands in the way of Sho'Nuff, a ne'er-do-well with a penchant for NFL shoulder pads and grand entrances, and who aims for, quote, total domination, unquote. Leroy's little brother Richie is a playa, and wants to get with Laura Charles, a very local VJ, back when VJs were a thing, who is probably twice Richie's age. Hang on to this plot point. Enter Eddie Arcadian, a balding businessman who is hell-bent on getting his protege, Angela Veraco's new video on Laura's show. Except her song sucks. Angela knows it. Everyone else knows it. Eddie won't believe it. Eddie goes a little crazy, decides to kidnap Laura. After all that, hilarity ensues.
Oh, God.
And this movie wasn't that long. That's the shortest that I could make that plot summary. Mark, as Kyle said earlier, this was your choice. Please to do be telling why.
To keep us on our toes.
Check.
Keep us fresh.
So this is a movie that I watched as a kid. I saw it a few times, and my little kid self was really enthralled by guys with glowing hands doing kung fu. And, why not? The sound of that it plays really well in my head.
100% awesome.
Mm-hmm. Turns out I repressed all memory of the rest of this movie. But it's something I had fond memories of, and it was good to revisit it, such that we can tear it apart in episode 2.
Lee, you also had a little history with this film.
My history is almost identical to Mark's. I watched it a lot as a kid. I think I had it recorded from HBO. And so I watched it over and over again because I was super obsessed with kung fu movies. I just remember it being really entertaining and fun to watch when I was a kid. And I don't think it held up.
Jer, what have you to say of this film?
Well, I don't have any history with it. I somehow missed this when it came out. All I will say is that I am delighted that I got to watch it now. And after watching it for this podcast, I was getting ready to start it back over again to watch it a second time in a row. I had such a great time watching this movie. which is the exact opposite reaction that my fiance had, who was physically and visibly angry that the movie was playing in our house. And she wants her venom to be known to all, that she's upset with all of us for even allowing this to happen.
Yeah, she let me know directly.
Really?
She makes some good points, but no matter what or how this movie actually is, I had a great time watching it.
It is entertaining to watch.
Well, let's continue talking about it then. As usual in part one here, we're going to talk about recasting the movie. We've got 4 major roles and 5 minor roles, so let's get to it. The first major role is that of Eddie. Andy, tell us about Eddie.
Eddie Arcadian, who was originally played by Christopher Murney, is a quote-unquote businessman, in that he conducts quote-unquote business that sometimes involves quote-unquote killing people. He seems to want to be a successful record producer and has pinned those dreams on the quote-unquote talents of a quote-unquote singer who seems to be an homage to Cyndi Lauper. Eddie Arcadian was a vehicle for the plot to move forward. He was, I guess, one of the bad guys, along with Sho'Nuff. Kind of a Fazzini? What's the character from Princess Bride?
Yeah, Fazzini.
Kind of a Fazzini character. A little bit was the vibe that I got. One of the things that I wanted to do to this movie to try to give it a chance was to one of the strategies that I'm taking is to gender flip everything. So my choice for Eddie Arcadian is Tilda Swinton.
What?
Because Tilda Swinton to me will always be terrifying as a bad guy. And regardless of how this character is written, Tilda Swinton will make the character excellent and terrifying and put a little verve into this character's performance. And I'll challenge any of you to argue against it.
I think one of the amazing things about this movie and recasting it is there are no wrong answers.
That's so true.
As soon as you said Vizzini, now I want to switch my pick to Wallace Shaw.
I
mean,
thought
you
about
can.
Wallace Shawn.
It'll
Yeah,
be awesome.
I was this close to doing it. Yeah.
He would be fantastic at it. So, Kyle, who are you choosing for Mr. Arcadian?
So I'm not only recasting a actor, I'm recasting an actor's performance in another movie that I want to reprise in this film. So I'm going deep. I'm going one level down. This role will be played by Tom Cruise as Les Grossman from Tropic Thunder. I want Les in this.
You want the character?
I want the character.
of Les Grossman.
We can just change Eddie's name. It could just be Les Grossman. It doesn't need to be Eddie Arcadian. Whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but then what? He wouldn't run arcades. He'd run gross
Well, we
factories.
can make it work.
How would we know without his last name what he does for a living?
It'll be hyphenated. Grossman Arcadian. Or maybe that's like his title, Grossman the Arcadian. Hey, you want to go down to Grossman Arcade again? Yeah, I went through a list of like short, bald, or baldish people that can be kind of annoying but are just great at the same time. And I was like, Jason Alexander, maybe. He can be kind of a prick. He was a prick in Pretty Women, so I could see, there's potential there. Wallace Shawn, again, I thought about. But then I was like, oh my God, this is an opportunity we have here to bring this back. So that's my plan, is
that would be fantastic.
Tom Cruise as Les Grossman as Eddie Arcadian. Les Grossman, the Arcadian.
Honestly, if there was a project that could be convincing to Tom Cruise to do that, I think it would be a Last Dragon remake.
I could 100% see that. Because I don't see a Tropic Thunder 2 happening anytime soon, but I think he'd be game. Lee, on to you. Who is your Eddie?
Well, Eddie Arcadian strikes me as a bit of a borderline Dick Tracy villain. He's kind of silly and not super imposing, in my opinion. So I wanted someone who had a little bit more of that. So I went with Benicio del Toro, who we're all familiar with because I think he's been cast quite a few times on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he does a really nice job of playing likable bad guys. So I think he would be good for Eddie Arcadian, being a little bit more soft-spoken, not quite so over the top, but could also be silly at times. I don't know if I had to name like a touchstone character, maybe his character from The Last Jedi. I forget the name of the character.
DJ. Is that right? DJ?
Yeah.
I think so.
Was that it?
No, I don't remember.
Or he's like a code breaker or something like that?
That's what it was. A great character completely wasted in a very forgettable part of that movie.
Yeah, exactly. But I think he'd be good for this.
Yeah, it was DJ. I was right. Ah!
His name
Yeah.
was DJ?
At the end, he explained it. It was like, they said something. It was like, don't judge or something like that. He's like, DJ. But no, it wasn't that. It was something. But they do explain it towards the end.
Interesting. All right, let's move on to Mark.
Okie dokie. So I was going for basically the exact same tone as the original film, at least for casting. I think in an actual remake, I would do something different. But for the purposes of this exercise, I just went with the exact same feel. And so I wanted to find somebody that was, intense and a little bit unhinged and a little bit slimy. And I also wanted to find like the biggest forehead that I could possibly imagine. And so I picked Walton Goggins.
That's a
Nice.
big forehead.
Mm-hmm. That's a large forehead.
He's a recent all-star of ours. He's been picked quite a bit in the last handful of episodes.
Yeah, he's a name that's been on my mind a little bit lately. He's in the series Invincible, which we've been discussing quite a bit lately.
Mm-hmm.
And he's all over the place, honestly.
Speaking of large foreheads, actually, his character has an enormous forehead.
Maybe they just mocapped him.
Yep. So that's my pick for Eddie Arcadian is Walton Goggins. Jared, let's move on to you.
Similar to Andy, I feel like this movie split its antagonist into two parts, and you have sort of the quote-unquote brains in Eddie and the brawn in Sho'Nuff. So I wanted to keep that sort of dynamic going, and like Kyle, I wanted somebody short and a little bit unhinged who was kind of balding, and I wanted somebody that was going to play this as cartoonishly weird as the original was played. So I went with Danny DeVito.
That's
my
pretty
God,
good.
that's
That's
so
pretty
good.
good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can talk about this in the next episode, but I don't know what the tone of this movie was supposed to be. But if it was a goofy comedy, then Danny DeVito is going to just eat this character up.
Are you
True.
remaking this as Romancing the Stone?
No, I'm remaking this as a Tim Burton Batman movie.
Either way, that's a win-win.
But yeah,
I just read an interview with Roman Mars, who runs Radiotopia and hosts 99% Invisible, one of the capital P podcasts in the world that's been around forever. And he just talked about what he's been watching or listening to. And he talked about a podcast called Blank Check, which is a movie podcast where the premise is they talk about directors who, after a successful film, were basically given like creative carte blanche after that. And so in this instance, they were talking about Romancing the Stone. Romancing the Stone did so well that it became a blank check for basically everything after that. The next movie happened to be Back to the Future for Robert Zemeckis, who directed Romancing the Stone. And that was even like a bigger blank check. And if you look at Robert Zemeckis' filmography, it's just crazy weird in between then. But they just keep writing blank checks for him. So it's very interesting. But they were talking about like the power of Danny DeVito and what an amazing story he is. Like just the power that he had. And I didn't know this, but Danny DeVito was Michael Douglas's roommate at some point. And when Michael Douglas went to film a TV show called The Streets of San Francisco, Danny DeVito was basically just like, struggling New York theater guy. And he's like, I knew Michael Douglas was a solid guy when he would always send his half of the rent, even when he didn't live there. So he could basically afford to live in New York, even while Michael Douglas wasn't living there. But then Michael Douglas did him a solid, hired him for a couple things. And then Romancing the Stone was the one that really took off for that. And then Taxi. And it was
They go
great.
way back.
Yeah.
Kyle, the Blank Check guys were actually special guests on the How Did This Get Made episode where they talked about the Snyder cut of Super Friends, whatever it's called. Justice League.
Justice League. Super Friends. Awesome. Okay, I'll check that out. Yeah, that was the first episode that I listened to. Roman basically said find a movie that you know and like and just listen to that episode, which is exactly how we talk about Remakers, Mark, right? Like it's, the best thing you can do to start with is just find a movie that you know and love and just hear us talk about it and you'll get into it more. So I just started with Romancing the Stone randomly and it's good. It was a good listen. This one had actually, weirdly enough, this had the guys from Film Spotting who have been around for forever. They're like one of the first movie podcasts. So they were on this one about Romancing the Stone. So movie podcasts all the way down.
Yeah, we got to get some of these guys on our podcast.
Seriously, I've contemplated emailing Adam and Josh from Film Spotting and just being like, hey, I love you guys. Please be on our show. So maybe I'll do that at some point. So for the role of Eddie Arcadian, originally played by Christopher Murney, God, this is amazing. Andy went with Tilda Swinton. I went with Tom Cruise. Lee went with Benicio del Toro. Mark went with Walton Goggins. Jer went with Danny DeVito. That's like a none of the above. when you look at that, like, where's the pattern here? What? Amazing. Up next is the role of Laura. Lee, tell us about Laura.
Well, before I do that, she's a VJ, not a recording artist. I don't know why I thought she was a recording artist. But let's see. Laura is a famous VJ, and I think it's not world famous. I think it's neighborhood famous, but famous nonetheless.
She's hyper local.
Yes. When she gets mixed up in Eddie Arcadian's business, not by her choice, she seeks the help of Leroy, her very own kung fu master, who seems incapable of noticing her romantic advances. I wanted to find someone who maybe was a musician in her former life. So I went with Kate Nash, who I know solely from Glow on Netflix. She's amazing on that show. And I didn't even know until after the show was over that she used to be a recording artist. And she's still a musician, but just not to the extent that she was. But that's something that she did in her former career and then moved on to acting. And I think she's amazing in both. I really like her music as well. But I thought she would be a really great complement to Leroy.
Who does she play on Glow?
She plays Rhonda, the British girl.
Oh, okay. Huh, I didn't know that.
So, yeah, that's my
That's
pick.
cool.
Kate Nash.
I like her a lot.
But Jer, who did you pick for Laura?
I also wanted to go with somebody that had sort of the cred of current music and the musical background to kind of make that role pop. So I went with Rihanna.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah. I think Riri could do that for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, she can do anything, but I think she could definitely pull this off and pull this movie out of the, where it is to somewhere respectable.
Andy, I know you've mentioned that you watched it. And I don't know if anybody else has, but she acted in the movie with, oh my gosh, not Danny Glover.
Donald Glover.
Donald Glover. Jeez, wow.
Danny
brain
Glover's
fart.
son, obviously.
Yeah, clearly. On Amazon.
Yeah,
right?
the kind of
Havana
long
something?
form video / musical. I forget what it was. I really enjoyed it. And I thought she did. Her part was relatively small, but she plays Donald Glover's character's love interest. But I thought it was a well-written character, and I thought she did a very good job.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't have much else to say about it because Rihanna speaks for herself. I'll leave it at that. Mark, who do you have?
Well, I was not going for somebody with a musical background, but I guess I should actually Google my choice to see if she has one. I was just going for somebody who has kind of an exotic look, and I chose Palm Clementif, whom we know from the MCU as Mantis, the empath from the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yep.
I like her.
I guess I didn't know her name.
Is she in anything
That's
else
my bad.
of note that we would know her from?
Apparently, the original Old Boy.
Yikes.
Really? Oh, that's cool.
That's a deep cut.
Huh. Yeah, seriously.
Yeah,
Intriguing. Yeah, that's a good call, Mark. I like that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like her look. I think that she would do really well, kind of glitzed up and in that glamorous sort of role. So that's my choice. Is Palm Clementif.
I need to look at pictures of her because right now all I'm doing is I picture Mantis and then I'm just taking a little antenna and going boop. And I was like, oh, that's what she looks like. But I know that's not what she looks like. So that's about as close as I can get right now. So I'll do some more research.
Yes, please do. But in the meantime, Kyle, who's your pick?
Yeah, so I decided to go sort of the closest homage that I'm doing to the original movie is that I am, for the most part, with the exception of Tom Cruise, casting musicians in every role. I wanted to give this a shot. I thought about maybe making it a musical, a kung fu musical, because my God, why not? I mean, if anything is going to do it, it's going to be this movie. I don't know if I quite landed there yet, but I know music is going to be a huge part. And ultimately, I would love for this to be like the banger kung fu hip hop soundtrack that just totally changes trends and brings the house down for a summer or something. And so for Laura, I decided to go with Solange Knowles.
Oh.
I really like her face. I like her presence. You know, her family is sort of talented, I would say, as the sister of Beyonce. She is incredible. And actually, she is an amazing musician. I don't know if anybody's listened to her records, but they are really, really cool. For as big and grandiose as Beyonce's music is, hers is... It's still, you know, very produced. It's not like she's Iron and Wine or something, but it's very personal, very individual, and extraordinarily good. So I highly recommend her music. But at the same time, if anybody's watched the Beyonce Coachella documentary, there's a bit where she and Solange do like a kind of like playground dance routine, and it's awesome. Like they both just absolutely throw down dancing. And I kept thinking of that when thinking about this role and how that would fit in with that. So I just think she's awesome. I think she's great. And I think she would do a great job with it.
Nice.
Thank you. Andy, on to you. Who is your Laura?
My Laura, again, continuing with my theme of gender swapping, switching, flipping, flopping, is to take this character and make it more interesting by casting Michael B. Jordan.
Okay.
Huh.
Okay. No one's going to deny that Michael B. Jordan is a handsome man. And I think the idea of him being the damsel in distress suddenly makes that character much more interesting.
All right. Yeah. Not so much in distress.
I can't wait to see who your Leroy is.
Especially if kidnapped by Tilda Swinton.
Yeah. Wow. This movie is something else, Andy, that you're
Just
making here.
wait.
Jinkies. For the role of Laura, originally played by Vanity, one named Vanity, Lee went with Kate Nash, Jer went with Rihanna, Mark went with Palm Clementif, I went with Solange Knowles, and Andy went with Michael B. Jordan. Up next is Sho'Nuff. Jer, tell us about Sho'Nuff.
Sho'Nuff, the Shogun of Harlem, is a bad dude. He's mean, he's intimidating, he wears shoulder pads with no shirt, and high-top Converse when he does kung fu. He's equal parts Johnny from Karate Kid and every bad guy in a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. Why? Because he's the master. Who is?
Sho'Nuff.
He was easily the most entertaining part of this movie. Julius Carey just decided that he was going to do everything at an 11, and
Thank God
it paid off. It paid off. I don't know exactly what this character was wanting or what his motivation was. Maybe Julius Carey didn't know either. It didn't matter. It was all just sort of leading up to an epic, fight with Leroy and glowing. So I wanted somebody, when I first was trying to build the character, I'm like, all right, I need somebody that's going to be a good fighter. It's going to, do this great battle and spar with him really well at the end. And I'm like, you know what? No, I don't want that. I want somebody who's going to deliver these lines and be this over-the-top, bizarre Shogun of Harlem presence who is so filled with himself. And all I want is the person who can deliver the lines with that punch and that badassness. So I said, screw the fighting. We're going with Samuel L. Jackson. I don't care that he's 70. He's my Sho'Nuff.
Wow.
I mean, the Shogun of Harlem, that could say Samuel L. Jackson. Like, I think it's very different than the original, but there's no reason why it can't be that. So
if Samuel L. Jackson said, who's the Shogun of Harlem, and everybody said Sho'Nuff, I would believe him.
Yes, you are, Mr. Nuff.
It's Dr. Nuff.
Oh, sorry. Please, Dr. Nuff is my father.
So,
Man.
yeah, I went a little out there, but I also went exactly where I wanted to go.
I did consider him, but
I didn't realize that Samuel L. Jackson is, in fact, in his 70s, which is insane.
the age kind of kept me from picking him, but
I
like
went
it.
back and forth, but ultimately he's my Sho'Nuff, and I'm going to die on that one. So, Andy, who is your Sho'Nuff?
There's only one person who could have possibly been a better Sho'Nuff than Samuel L. Jackson, and it's my pick of Leslie Jones. I don't care if she knows if she has any martial arts skill. Enough of it can be learned for the sake of the movie, but it's not her martial arts skill that I want. It's everything else. I want her as Sho'Nuff.
Yeah. No, that's... Yep.
What would be amazing is if she doesn't know any kung fu, but just happens to have like the body light thing that she just kind of like just slaps at you. It just happens to be really strong slaps at you. Like
She just knocks you
somehow
down.
channeled that.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
I really want to hear your Leroy pick now.
Mm-hmm. Kyle, to you.
Yeah, so going with the musician theme that I'm going with here, I wanted somebody who has a larger-than-life presence in every way, and I decided to go with someone who's been in the news of late. He was just on SNL recently. You may have seen his music video where he gives Satan a lap dance. That's right. I'm going with Lil Nas X for Sho'Nuff. If anybody can wear shoulder pads without a shirt and be ripped as all get out and have his body glow while doing kung fu, and also happens to be a musician, I think Lil Nas X is the one. Once I thought of this, I could not get it out of my head, and then I just stopped trying to fight it, and I just said, that is perfect. So Lil Nas X, Old Town Road, Montero, Call Me By Your Name. So good. What a guy. Lee, on to you. Who is your Sho'Nuff?
Well, while I thought Julius Carry's portrayal was sufficient and very kind of, he was pretty intimidating. He's a really tall guy, but I didn't find him like all that jacked. He's more like, I don't know, maybe groundskeeper ripped. But I thought
which, as we've determined in the 80s, was legitimate.
Yes. He was very ripped for 1985. But present day, I'd want someone who is a little bit more physically imposing and who has a really good stare. So I went with Jason Momoa.
Nice.
That would do it.
Whoa.
Because he can stare right through you.
He's getting pretty ripped these days.
Yeah.
Getting? He's been ripped forever.
Yeah. Did you see Aquaman?
Or Game of Thrones?
When has he not been ripped?
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's a big Sho'Nuff.
Yep. But Mark, who is your Shogun of Harlem?
Okay. So, first off, I adored what Julius Carry did in the original film. I think he was right in the pocket coming out of that Gary Oldman school of overacting. It was exactly right for what I wanted in the character, and it went down real smooth for me. So I wanted exactly that same thing, just with somebody who would deliver with that same ridiculousness. And well, I picked Keegan-Michael Key for my guy.
Nice.
That is brilliant. That is a brilliant pick.
Thank you. Yeah, I
feel like he actually
would,
played this character on Key and Peele.
He very well may have. Yeah, so
Dang.
I think he would turn it up to 11, and that's exactly what I want. So Keegan-Michael Key.
I think we just go through the sketch of them being various football players announcing their name.
Yeah, the East-West Bowl.
One of them is Sho'Nuff, I'm sure.
Man, those are so good. Let's review that, shall we? Sho'Nuff, originally played by Julius Carry. Jer went with Samuel L. Jackson. Andy went with Leslie Jones. I went with Lil Nas X. Lee went with Jason Momoa. And Mark went with Keegan-Michael Key. Now, that's a superhero troupe right there. My God.
Gosh.
I would not mess with that crew.
I want to watch that show of just those actors.
Yes, here. And last but not least, the role of Leroy Green, or Bruce Leroy. Mark, tell us about Leroy.
Certainly. Originally played by Timac, Leroy leads a simple life, enjoying Bruce Lee movies and training in the martial arts himself. He apparently does little else, so when his master declares that his training is complete and he must now find a new master, Leroy is a bit lost. Thankfully, he'll have his familiar martial arts to lean on as he comes into with Eddie Arcadian and Sho'Nuff, and maybe he'll learn to be a regular New Yorker along the way. I may not bet on that, but maybe.
Probably not.
I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew it when I would see it. So I just scrolled through a list of names on imdb.com.
It's served us well in the past.
It has. The one that I landed on is Justice Smith. He's a guy that we know from a couple of things. He was the lead in Pokemon Detective Pikachu.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and he was in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. He's the kind of the tech nerd guy. And I really, really look forward to seeing him in the upcoming Dungeons & Dragons film.
Ooh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked him in Detective Pikachu. That was good casting.
Yeah, I think he's got a quietness about his demeanor, which for me really suits a Leroy. I can just imagine him being that kind of Zen monk sort of dude. So that's my Leroy, is Justice Smith. Kyle, how about you?
continuing with my musical trend, I had a few different ideas, including Lil Nas X for this one. I thought about maybe a dual role, but I thought that would be just too crazy. And Usher, I thought about, but I landed on Abel Makonnen Tesfaye, who you probably know as The Weeknd. I think he's got the look for it, you know. He's got that little bit of unhinged, and I would want this character to be more unhinged than naive. I feel like that would be a change that I would make. I want him to adapt to the world differently, but no less awkward, I guess. And so I felt like he, you know, just like seeing kind of all the personas that he has put on throughout his career, he has done so many different musical things and so many different sort of, you know, presences around that. I could see him doing that from an acting perspective as well. No idea if he can do kung fu or not. He can learn. It's fine. So yeah, The Weeknd is who I decided to go with.
Very nice.
Thanks. Andy, what you got? We are on bated breath for this one.
To lend a little bit of legitimacy to my picks, because I will admit I've gone a little silly to this point. I chose an actress who has undisputed martial arts proficiency. She is a Chinese actress that I'm going to attempt to pronounce her name. I will almost certainly pronounce it incorrectly, but you will definitely know her when I mention one film. The actress is Ziyi Zhang, and the movie is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
I've heard of it.
Okay, good.
I'm familiar.
Good. So now that movie, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, is probably 20 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Potentially.
15 at least.
Yeah, it's more, because it was right when we moved into the Twin Cities about that time. It was not too long after that.
2000,
2001.
exactly. 2000. So, I mean, she's obviously much older than she was in that film. She was a you know, probably played like a teenager in that movie. So the character would need to be rewritten as someone, as a woman who is older. However, I still think she's a very young looking woman. But really, the point is, I want someone who actually is an incredibly accomplished martial artist and would just put a nice little amount of ass kickery into this movie.
Yeah.
Ziyi Zhang.
She is, and she would.
So fierce.
Yeah. Jer, it is to you.
Yes. I wanted somebody that was going to be, so first I was looking for somebody that had experience in martial arts and had some potentials. And then I broadened my search a little bit to just people that I knew had good physical capabilities in fighting and whatnot. But I wanted somebody that was going to be of a similar sort of smaller, muscular stature that the original Leroy had. He was more like what a typical martial artist is, in that it's more about speed than it is just being all bulked up and swole. So I wanted somebody that had sort of that speed and athleticism, but also had that same kind of like quietness to him, kind of leaning more towards kind of the David Carradine kung fu, like Zen type of mentality. Maybe a little bit of the naivety of the original, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. But I went with Jacob Anderson, whose most notable role is Grey Worm in Game of Thrones. He was also in Broadchurch and a couple other British television shows. I think he's a really great actor, and I want, in my remake, I want him to be British. He's got a great accent, and I want it to lean into that, to be this British kid that learned kung fu and now moved to New York to be Bruce Lee or whatever. You know, that makes about as much sense as the original. So, but I love his look. I think he's shown that he has the capability to be kind of action oriented and in his fight scenes. So I think he would do an excellent job with some martial arts training.
I think the plot would be that he moved to New York to find the master.
Yeah, exactly.
He needed to find the fortune cookie machine.
Yes.
Yep. That is my pick. And are we, last but not least, we are on Lee.
Yep. I really wanted someone who kind of followed in the footsteps of the original actor. And so I wanted to go with someone a little more soft-spoken, but, you know, could fight. So I picked Michael B. Jordan, and I hope he doesn't get picked for both roles.
I think he could pull it off.
I hope he does.
He could pull it off. See, that's how versatile he is. He could play both roles.
that was like the first actor I thought of for a role like this, because his demeanor is very similar to Leroy's. In
The
most
plot
of the
could be
movies
that
I've
he's
seen.
rescuing his twin brother.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. For the role of Leroy, originally played by Timac, this has the most one-named people in it that I'm aware of in all of our movies, so we got that going for us. Mark went with Justice Smith. I went with The Weeknd. Andy went with Ji Zhang. Jer went with Jacob Anderson. And Lee went with Michael B. Jordan. All right, now on to the minor characters to wrap up here. First of which is Rock, originally played by Mike Starr. Rock is, well, he's a hired goon. Maybe he has a past in boxing, maybe he owes some money here or there, or maybe he's just not the sharpest tool in the shed. Any way you slice it, he does hired goon things like take directions poorly, fight even more poorly, and act menacing-ish.
Yeah, he's kind of a waste of space in this movie.
He is.
Yeah,
you know what,
kinda.
Andy? It's funny that you say that, because the person that I cast for this is someone who I view as a musical waste of space. That person is Drake. One of my
Shots
one of
fired.
my favorite
Wow.
one of my favorite records, and for
He
sure
seems so nice.
my favorite Kanye West record is 808s and Heartbreaks. And the fact that Drake basically like took that kind of direction and then made the Diet Coke of that and made a gajillion dollars doing that, like, makes me like that 808s and Heartbreak records less. And that is not cool. So I just don't like him. I just don't think he's very exciting at all. In fact, he's like just blasé. Anyways, that said, I think
he goes down so easy though.
I know. That's the worst part. That said, I think he's willing to poke fun at himself. Like, he's not self-serious. And I feel like he would play a dumb goon super well in a way where, like, even if he didn't hear me just, knock the hell out of him, I think he would be like, all right, I'm down for that. Let's try it. So, Drake, good on you for, I think, being game for this. Just stay off the soundtrack is all I'm asking.
I think he'd be game for it.
I do too. Thanks, Drake. Lee, on to you.
Leroy's master, played by Thomas Ikeda. Leroy's master is an old Chinese guy with a long gray beard. That is all. He's only in 2 scenes, and yet they're pivotal scenes, which is interesting because he verbally expresses Leroy's expressed goal in Act 1. And then he gives Leroy like his final clue to where he needs to be looking more towards the end of the movie. I would really like to have this character be a little bit more involved, like there's a little more interaction. And I decided to kind of do a gender switch, and I cast Michelle Yeoh, who we would also know from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Man, it's a natural fit with Ji Zhang.
Yep.
It's as if, Lee, I feel like you and I, we're just a yin and yang here. I love it.
Yep.
Stars are aligning.
Man, aren't they ever?
Yeah, I really like the idea of Leroy's master not being an old Chinese guy, but a very wise martial artist woman. So
I never could quite figure out, was he like grifting Leroy, or was he actually a good teacher?
My theory is that he got sick of Leroy hanging around all the
think
time.
so.
And he just needed a
That's
reason to
kind of
get
how
rid
it
of him.
felt. Yeah, that's kind of how it felt.
I mean, imagine
So-
that guy's your student. You're just like, seriously, dude. Like,
You are taking this way too seriously.
pump the brakes a little, okay?
This is a class for kids, and you've been here for 15 years.
So the opening scene where he's shooting arrows at him, that's him trying to get him to leave.
If I
Like,
just
he's like,
wing him.
maybe if I actually kill him and just say, oh, it was a training accident. Oops.
It's like, oh, he's chopping the arrows out of the air. Damn it.
I kind of got a vibe of Ben Kingsley as the Mandarin. Is that right? Am I remembering that? Is that the character's name?
Yeah,
In
that's right.
Iron Man 2?
3.
3. Thank you.
Best part of the
Yeah.
movie.
It's pretty terrible, but at the same time, it's pretty great. So yeah, I kind of got that vibe of it.
But let's move on to Andy.
Oh man. I'm just picturing Ben Kingsley. That movie was so but he was so great in it. Anyway, Angela Veraco is who I'm going to talk about. Originally played by Faith Prince, she was an homage of sorts to Cyndi Lauper. Angela Veraco is, in my opinion, the most interesting character in the film, in that she actually has an arc and experiences change. For all that, however, she mostly serves as the MacGuffin for evil Eddie Arcadian's plans. Poor Angela Veraco. She knew she was bad, but she was just riding that train as long as it would go. I'm going to reach way back. It's a repeat pick for me. It didn't do well the first time. I think it's got a better chance this time. I chose Taylor Swift.
Oh, boy.
Because, again, speaking of musical artists who I think can poke fun at themselves a little bit, I would put Taylor Swift into that category. And having fun being just a really bad pop singer, I think would be...
So you're saying she's this millennium's Cyndi Lauper?
No, but I think she would have fun dressing up and playing one.
All right.
What would be even better is if she sang like a legit Taylor Swift song and had the video for it, and they don't have any reaction while people are watching it. And then at the end, they pan, they're like, nah, just completely disregard it. That'd be pretty great.
Yeah. So there you go. Taylor Swift as Angela Veracco. Mark, it is on to you.
Okie dokie. I'm going to present to you Richie Green. Originally played by Leo O'Brien, Richie is, in a word, confident. He is Leroy's younger brother, yet knows so much more about the world and is way cooler. He probably overestimates his abilities, though, and jumps at any chance to fight Eddie and Sho'Nuff or hit on Laura. I wanted to go for somebody who has a young look and turns out is really familiar with 80s. I picked Caleb McLaughlin, who we know from Stranger Things, where he plays Lucas.
Oh, nice. Okay. I dig that.
Nice.
How old do you think he was supposed to be in the movie?
Richie?
Yeah.
I figured like 14 or something.
Yeah.
I was going to say like 13,
I would say 12
14.
to 14. Yeah. Oy.
Hormones a-raging, no idea what to do with it.
Man.
But all the confidence of what he should do with it.
I like that. That's a good call. I didn't recognize the name, but now that you say that, that's a really good call.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to Jer.
Yeah, speaking of ages, the ages in this movie made no sense. Everybody was either too old or too young, or acting too old or too young, and nothing was clear as to how old people were supposed to be. Which brings up Johnny Yu, the character I'm going to announce. He is a student in Leroy's dojo? ? I don't remember him having a dojo, but then all of a sudden he did. Johnny seems less than adept at kung fu, flirting, escaping danger, and standing up to bullies, and his claim to have mastered the art of fighting without knowing how doesn't hold water. Johnny was a breath of fresh air in this movie, however. Played by Glenn Eaton. I thoroughly enjoyed him. He, again, just like many other people, was he 20? Was he 12? I couldn't quite figure out what was going on with these students in this dojo. So I'm going to go with he's like a teenager learning karate or learning kung fu or whatever martial arts they're doing. So I'm going to go with that sort of, cut it to the middle and in the 15 to 16-year-old range. And I cast, going back to Stranger Things like Mark, Gotten Matarazzo.
Oh, okay.
Who on Stranger Things played Dustin.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
I think he would nail the weird charm that Johnny Yu brought to the role, and also his just bumbling comedic abilities.
100%.
Yeah, totally.
All the above. That's good. Man, God, this casting is nuts. We did really well.
I think we did the movie
nuts.
justice.
I think so. Holy mackerel. Well, with that wraps up the casting here and this first half of our discussion of The Last Dragon. Thank you, gentlemen. That was a ton of fun. Remakers Mark is a proud member of the Math is Hard Network. To find out more information about this podcast or any other podcast on the network, check us out at mathishard.net. There you will find show notes with links to all of the people, movies, and links discussed in this episode. This information is also attached to the show file in the podcast client of your choice. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and review us, which would mean the world to us. And now we are also on YouTube. We're on Facebook, search for Remakers Mark, Twitter at Remakers Mark, and Instagram at Remakers Mark Podcast, so please join in the discussion there as well. So, gentlemen, we made it through The Last Dragon. I can't wait till the sequel, The Next to Last Dragon. Until the meantime, just remember, may the Force be with you.
And also with you.